Wagwan. Today's the time when we finally continue with the most successful series on the channel, so the gang relations in GTA. You lot seem to like it, the views are telling the same story, I enjoy making these, so here it is. This time we take on GTA Vice City stories. Yeah, I know I skipped GTA Advance and GTA Liberty City stories, but you know, GTA Advance is... And when it comes to GTA LCS, the reason I skipped it is that I have already released a video where I explain most of the gang wars in the game. Today though, let's focus on the incredible GTA VCS. And as always, I'm sorry if some of the threads are going to be described multiple times, but that's for the people who only need to watch selected chapters, so they can still get all the info they need. However, I'll try to abstract each time a thread is repeated to make this watchable for everyone. Martinez's gang versus Cholos. So Martinez gang was led by Jerry Martinez. You know, the zoophilic porno lover who's a sergeant in the Vice City Army unit. I don't even know which is worse. Martinez was one cheeky bastard. He used his army career as cover for selling drugs and trading guns. Cholos, on the other hand, were a Hispanic gang operating around the Little Haiti area, even though they were actually Mexican. They were into what everyone in Vice City liked: extortions, brothels, drugs, guns, killing for kicks, all the usual business. The leader is unknown. In GTA Vice City's stories, those two organizations had a few clashes, mainly in the gun trade area. See, the Cholos had ambitions to become the only gun runner on the local ground. Therefore, they obviously had to get rid of any competition. Such competition was Phil Cassidy, a war veteran who had to turn to crime to earn a living. Phil was working for Martinez. He was the one taking care of the gun trade branch in Jerry's operation. That's why he was a problem for the Cholos. The Cholos even kicked him out of his yard, forcing him to move to his depot in the docks. The Cholos didn't get the chance to enjoy their new property for long though, because Phil had left the money he was supposed to give back to Martinez there. Victor Vance, one of the soldiers that Martinez recruited, was sent to get past the Cholos hanging out at Phil's old place and retrieve the money for Jerry. Phil must have felt more confident since Martinez made Vance help him with the business. He decided to take revenge on the Cholos by killing one of the gang members. Nothing says don't ever try to come at man again as shooting down a random and probably completely insignificant low-ranked soldier of a big street gang. But the Cholos were not going to give up after this massive blow. They also schemed a vendetta on Phil by setting fire to his drug warehouse. His weaponry warehouse. Oh no, wait, that's not it neither. What was it? Right, his personal alcohol storage. Jesus, I had more serious conflicts at primary. Fortunately, thanks to Vance's help, all the liquor got saved, so Phil could get wasted again. And at this point it seems that those two massive clashes saw both Phil and the Cholos so severely weakened that they called a truce to not suffer any more losses and casualties. Trailer Park Mafia versus Cholos. The Liberty City Mafia families could only dream to become as influential, well-organized, professional and sophisticated as that bunch of scuzzy creeps living at that stinking trailer park. That's because the LC Mafias could simply never sink that low. Yeah, well, the Trailer Park Mafia was in reality a group of blunt rednecks led by Marty Williams, the woman beater. Even though they were just a bunch of assholes, they ran a protection racket and a repo fraud in the area, which brought a conflict with the Cholos, who were also fighting for businesses in the same area. Marty's posse was surprisingly doing better in this feud, much thanks to the help of that soldier who worked for Martinez, Victor Vance, who found himself having to work for Marty after he had been kicked out of the army. He was the one to make sure that the local shops were paying protection to Marty and scared off any Cholos trying to change that. Also later, the Cholos were disturbing Marty in his repo business, and Vic showed him their place by blowing up some of their merchandise at a few of their businesses and killing some of their soldiers protecting them. Marty wanted to capitalize on the fact that he gained himself such a skillful soldier and decided to hit Cholos hard by taking over one of their brothels. Vance went and cleared the place out so Marty could build his brand new evening hospitality lounge. The lounge had to be soon protected, as well as the employees in the customer service department who were attacked by the Cholos. The Mexicans lost again, and there was no further doubt about who won this war. Vance Crime Family versus Trailer Park Mafia. The scuzzy creeps didn't have too much time to celebrate, as Marty's strongest weapon now became his biggest weakness. Victor Vance, thanks to whom Marty could win the war with the far stronger Cholos gang, soon killed him after Marty wanted to employ his wife, Louise, as a customer service assistant in his funhouse. Victor, who developed a connection with Marty's wife after she had moved out from his house because he was treating her like ish, stopped Marty from doing that and killed him. This was a major blow for the trailer parkers, and funnily enough, it was none other than Marty's wife who wanted to capitalize on the opportunity. She got her savior, Vic, to gather up some men and take over Marty's businesses. That way, Vance Crime Family has been formed, with Victor being its leader, and whose first interest became the businesses taken over from Marty's gang after Marty's death. The brothel that had once belonged to the TPM now became the property of the Vance Crime Family, and as means of revenge for Marty's death, Marty's cousin set fire to the brothel. The brothel got extinguished in time thanks to the quick intervention of Luis and Victor, and the perpetrator himself paid therefore with his own life, thereby probably ending the existence of the Trailer Park Mafia. Vance Crime Family vs Cholos. Vance Crime Family, which got formed on the remnants of the Trailer Park Mafia, also shared its enemies. Victor, after all, while he was working for Marty, he single-handedly caused them a whole heap of trouble, and he basically embarrassed them after they lost the war with the much weaker Trailer Park Mafia. Therefore, they wanted to get back at him for all this chaos. They took this very personally, as they deployed all their forces around town to hunt Vic down, who just casually killed them all himself and escaped. This feud, however, continued as a turf war, with Cholos and the VCF fighting for businesses around the city. Trailer Park Mafia and Los Cabrones alliance. Los Cabrones were a recently arisen Cuban gang led by Humberto Robina and holding their turf in Little Havana. Their alliance with the Trailer Park Mafia was not directly portrayed in the game's story, but we know that it took place. First we could find out about it was on the VCS teaser website, where it stated that experts concluded that the Cubans and the TPM united forces in order to abolish, what's interesting, the once dominant gang of Mexican Cholos.
Los Cabrones are a new bunch of desperados, hell-bent on machismo and on killing for kicks. Some local experts claim the gangs are working with various criminal elements in the local trailer park community to drive the once dominant local gang, the Cholos, out of Vice City and set up their own criminal empire.
So it seemed like the Cholos had actually been the main threat in the streets before the time of the event of GTA VCS. Still, what was certain is that they certainly constituted a mutual enemy for the Cubans and the TPM, which saw them collaborate. The second proof we get of there being an alliance between Marty's crew and Humberto's muchachos is this dialogue from the mission Nice Package.
You worked for Marty for years, so in between men, can I rely on you?
What was the exact nature of the partnership? We don't know, but it was probably that Humberto provided Marty with soldiers, as well as he paid him a percentage of the profit in exchange for his protection. Vance Crime Family and Los Cabrones alliance. Similarly as the VCF inherited the enemies of the Trailer Park Mafia, they also inherited their allies. At least that was the case with Los Cabrones, who immediately after Marty got buried contacted Vic saying they needed to talk. Victor came and saw this as an opportunity to gain a strong ally, especially that the organization which he essentially took over and rebranded, so the TPM, used to be tight with the Cubans. Robina expected the same, but he first wanted Vic to prove that his organization were a big deal, and they were supposed to prove that by helping the Cubans finish the Cholos off. Victor eventually helped Humberto's men do that by blowing up their guns warehouse, killing dozens of soldiers in the process. Later, Humberto returned the favor to Vic by helping him protect his empire from the Mendez Cartel, who wanted to take it over after VCF had stolen their drugs. Los Cabrones vs Cholos. And now we're going to go a little bit more in detail into the Hispanic gang war in VCS, in which Victor helped Humberto. First, Victor helped the Cubans clear their streets from the Cholo thugs, who were causing havoc in their neighborhood. Then, the leader Robina's father planned to be attacked by the Cholos. However, thanks to Vance's smart route choices, they managed to avoid them and keep Mr. Alberto alive. And then the time came from the ultimate showdown. The plan was to raid the Cholos' guns warehouse. First, Vance was supposed to clear the way for the Cubans' trucks to arrive by taking out all the security guarding the warehouse. Then, he was supposed to cover Humberto's men from the Cholos' backup while they were loading up their guns onto the trucks. And finally, once all the guns got loaded up, they left a big ass piñata shaped as Humberto Robina, which exploded after the Cholos tried destroying it after the Cuban crew cleared out of the place, leaving the warehouse in ruins, putting the ultimate stamp on their victory over the Mexican gang. Martinez gang versus Cubans. We know very little about this one actually. It was only briefly mentioned by Humberto in the mission Bulls.
Listen, we got a problem, huh? Your boy Jerry, he's causing all sorts of trouble.
Martinez?
Funnily enough, in the mission itself, we fight the Cholos, not Martinez's people, and there's no other moment in which this feud is highlighted in any way. It can be assumed though that Martinez decided to hit the Cubans after he'd found out that Vic was in an alliance with him, whom he wanted to get revenge on after all. Vance Crime Family versus Bikers. The Bikers were a gang of motorcycle enthusiasts possibly run by Mitch Baker in 1984. The feud began with the Bikers' properties became the target of Vance Crime Family's expansion ambitions, and the two gangs engaged in turf wars ever since. One time, they also crossed paths when they both were informed about a valuable file, which a retiring dealer was willing to pass on to the first gang to reach him at the airport. Both the Bikers and the VCF were late. However, they engaged in a bullet exchange trying to steal the docs from the guy to whom they were passed on by the initial holder. The Vance brothers, Victor and Lance, won the shootout and claimed the foul. The next story clash between the two gangs came through the Mendez Cartel, on whose leash the VCF found himself on. Armando, a co-leader of the cartel, wanted Victor Vance to take over the business of the Bikers in Vice Point in order to set up shop there. Victor done that and killed all the Bikers guarding the area. And the last one was also somewhat connected with the Mendezes. See, someone stole the drugs of the Mendezes, and the Vance brothers were delegated by them to find out where they are and to retrieve them. The problem was that the brothers had absolutely no idea on where to even start looking for them. One of them, Lance, also driven by personal reasons, took a guess that it was the Bikers who had stolen them. Therefore, he and Vic ended up raiding the hangout of the Bikers, which was the hotel under construction downtown, in search for the missing drugs. The guess was incorrect, as the brothers didn't find any drugs on the site. Yet, the sole encounter left dozens of Bikers shot dead at the site. Vance Crime Family versus the White Stallionz. Another biker gang operating in Vice City, much less significant and whose members were mostly men of homosexual orientation, was the White Stallionz. Their only notable business was the White Stallionz bar, where they also mainly hung out at. One time, a clash with the Vance brothers occurred at that bar after the brothers showed up uninvited to a party and walked right into the middle of the action because they had been misinformed that a valuable contact was awaiting them at the bar. The Bikers didn't like it and decided to beat up the brothers. That turned out to be a huge mistake though, as the brothers mashed them all up and escaped. Vance Crime Family versus Martinez's gang. Victor Vance, a co-leader of the VCF, had a loose end in the shape of Jerry Martinez, who had promised to hunt him down ever since one of his workers, Phil Cassidy, introduced Victor to Marty Williams, who had given him work, putting an end to Victor's full financial dependence on Martinez, for whom he had had to work after he had got him kicked out of the army. That actually turned out to be more or less a false promise, as apart from Martinez stirring up some little trouble for Vic's ally, the Cubans, he ain't posed any threat for him nor showed any intentions to do so. It was Vic who eventually decided to get revenge on Martinez for ruining his army career and forcing him into the criminal underworld. When his brother Lance found out about a shipment of cocaine Martinez was transporting, assuming it's his, they decided to steal it for themselves. They organized men and successfully stole and escaped with the drugs. The drugs, however, soon turned out to have belonged to the Mendez Cartel rather than Martinez, who was just delivering it for him. The Vance brothers, who have soon lost the drugs, trying to avoid claiming full responsibility for the loss of the drugs, wanted to convince the Mendezes that Martinez stole the drugs back, as he apparently was a policeman. Therefore, in order to prove Martinez's would-be blame to the Mendezes, they forged a fake police ID of Jerry Martinez. Martinez, on the other hand, indeed turned to the feds, promising to provide information on the gang of the Vances, however, eventually failing to do so and escaping from the WITSEC program. He reunited his people and wanted to get revenge on Vic for ruining his criminal career by stealing them drugs. Therefore, he targeted Louise Cassidy, a cousin of his former employee Phil and the girlfriend of Victor. Martinez had Louise kidnapped and battered up proper. Vic, however, managed to get past Martinez's goons and save Louise in time. Sometime later, Martinez tricked the Vance brothers in order to steal their drugs. He found out about Lance soon cutting a deal. He used the fact that Louise was in a hospital to lure Vic away from Lance by warning them that he'll soon pay her a visit. Vic, worried for Louise, left Lance to deal with the meeting on his own and went to pick up Louise, who turned out to be alright. This quickly turned out to be a trap, because not long after, Lance paged Vic reporting that he had been ambushed by Martinez, who was running away with the coke. The three of them reacted in time though and managed to retrieve the drugs from Martinez's people. The last encounter between Martinez and the Vances took place in the last story mission. Victor, after killing Armando, finally wanted to ultimately finish off the Mendez Cartel by raiding their fortress downtown and killing its remaining leader, Diego Mendez. It was during that encounter when Martinez arrived at the scene with the intention to hit both Vic and Mendez as a third party and take over. His plans were ultimately spoiled by Victor, who managed to beat him in a shootout and kill him, thereby ending the lifetime of his gang. Martinez's gang and Mendez Cartel alliance. From the game's story, we know that at one point the Mendez Cartel employed Martinez's gang to oversee the delivery of a cocaine shipment for him. We don't know the extent of Martinez's responsibilities, however, we know that the rumor about it was around for long before the final delivery, so perhaps the process was more complicated. It's likely that Martinez was not only supposed to get the drugs through the city, but to find a seller, import the drugs from the Mendez's home country, ensuring its protection, and then deliver it to them in Vice City. It's also possible that those was his regular duties, and not just a one-time partnership. Martinez's gang versus Mendez Cartel. What we can say for certain though is that it definitely ended during the events of GTA Vice City stories, when Martinez failed to deliver the drugs due to them being stolen by the Vance Crime Family and turned to the police with the intention to snitch on the Mendezes to avoid prison. After that plan had failed him, he decided to take matters into his own hands. After Victor Vance had killed Armando Mendez, he showed up at the remaining Mendez fortress to kill him. He ultimately fell though, as he lost his life before he could do so at the hands of Victor Vance. Vance Crime Family versus Mendez Cartel, beef turned alliance turned beef. Yeah, these guys went all over the place and couldn't decide on whether they liked each other or not. It all started when the drugs belonging to the Mendez Cartel, which the Vance brothers thought belonged to the courier employed by the Mendezes, so Martinez's gang, were stolen by them. The brothers soon lost the drugs though. The Mendezes at first wanted to simply take the drugs back by force, along with the entire empire owned by the Vance brothers, failing to do so however due to the VCF managing to defend themselves. After that, the Mendezes asked the Vance brothers to return the drugs, which like I said, had been lost by them. The Vances, in order to not have to war the Mendezes, which war they would have certainly lost, lied to them that Martinez had stolen the drugs, as he apparently was an undercover. They managed to fabricate a good enough would-be proof for it, so the Mendez brothers allowed them to work off what they had lost. And so the brothers had to work for the Mendezes. They helped them defeat their competition in Vice Point, as well as later retrieve the drugs that had been stolen from them. After that, the Mendezes offered the brothers a deal. They would forget all about the shipment they had stolen from them, they would leave them in peace, but only if the brothers would give them all their interests and leave town forthwith. The offer was rejected by the Vances, which saw them being stunned by the Mendezes and almost executed if it had not been for the sheer luck and incompetence of the hitmen. In the following days, the Mendezes took another shot at the forced solution. They coordinated a massed attack at all of the Vance's businesses, However, the VCF, with the help of their allies such as the Cubans, yet again managed to defend themselves against the juggernaut. Lance also got in contact with the local drug baron Ricardo Diaz, hoping to earn his alliance and that he would help them with their feud against the Mendezes. Meanwhile, another contact affiliated with the VCF, a German film director, René Wasselmeier, also had problems with the Mendez Cartel. Diego, who was René's ex-lover, was angry at them because they had introduced Victor to aforementioned Ricardo Diaz, and now he tried to get them killed. Victor helped René escape the wrath of Diego Mendez and soon escorted her to the airport, from where she fled the city for Europe. Soon, once the brothers had completed a few favors for Ricardo Diaz, he was willing to help them, only of course because it highly suited him as well, to get rid of the Mendezes. The first step was to deprive Armando Mendez of his funds by using high-tech gear to infiltrate his property and burn down his bearer bonds, which Victor Vance successfully carried out. The Mendezes, however, would not let that slide, and soon Vic lost something far more valuable than the bearer bonds he had destroyed. The Mendezes soon kidnapped Louise, Vic's woman, whom they threatened to kill unless they agreed to flee the city, and they destroyed Lance's white furnace. Those two acts pissed the brothers off so much that they both rushed to the Mendezes' mansion in order to save Louise and take ultimate revenge on them. And they partially succeeded. They managed to kill Armando Mendez. However, that turned out to be just an equalizer, because Vic, a while after killing the Baron, found Louise bleeding out at the upper floor of the mansion with Diego Mendez, the other co-leader of the cartel, nowhere to be seen. The VCF was now though in a much better position in this war. Soon, following the recommendation of Diaz, Vic stole a combat helicopter, which he then used to bomb the fortress of the cartel, where Diego Mendez was hiding at, and whose location had been revealed to Vic by Ricardo Diaz. Victor's assault saw him victorious as he managed to kill Diego Mendez, thereby ultimately destroying the cartel. Mendez Cartel versus the Bikers. Even though this beef is only highlighted in one mission in the actual story, it had actually been going on for years, as was reported by Armando Mendez, who claimed that the bikers have been ripping him off for years, which could mean some shipment raids, business takeovers, etc, etc.
What do you need me to do?
Head to Vice Point. The people there have been ripping me off for years.
In VCS, we saw Armando using his subservient ally, the VCF, to take over one of their businesses in Vice Point. Vance Crime Family and Cortez's gang alliance turned beef turned alliance. Cortez's gang was an organization led by a Hispanic cultural attaché in America, whose business involved drug trade, weapons trade, and military secrets trade. In 1984, Colonel Juan Garcia Cortez, the aforementioned leader, wanted to get involved in the cocaine market in Vice City. As a matter of it, he sent his right-hand man, Gonzalez, to Vice City with over 200 kilograms of snow for him to sell there. Gonzalez, upon arriving in the city, needed protection to transport the merch across town, which was provided to him by Victor Vance of the Vance Crime Family, who had been recommended to him by a mutual contact. The shipment was attacked by Diaz's gang, however neither the VCF or Gonzalez's people were aware of it. I mean, they were aware of the attack, of course, but they weren't aware that it was Diaz's people. The assailants eventually failed to cause any harm to the shipment, which arrived at its planned destination. Soon, Victor of the VCF also helped Gonzalez in disposing of the person who leaked the information about the attack shipment. Gonzalez was very happy with Victor's help, so he asked him to deliver the drugs to a buyer he'd found in order to make some unofficial side profit using some of the coke he had been given by his boss. Despite Victor getting jumped midst within and therefore losing some of the drugs, he still managed to get most of it back. However, Gonzalez was disappointed and decided to end his business relationship. The VCF didn't hold any loyalties towards Gonzalez's crew then, so when they soon got asked by Ricardo Diaz to steal their drugs, so they did. And furthermore, they later provided Diaz's men with additional cover during the exchange, in which Diaz sold the stolen coke to the DEA in return for high quality firepower. Gonzalez's men attempted to ambush the deal and retrieve the drugs before it was too late, ultimately failing. That left Gonzalez desperate and coming to Ricardo Diaz begging for mercy, trying to cut a deal. He managed to do so, but he had to become Diaz's snitch within the ranks of Cortez's gang. Diaz gave him the guns back though, and Victor was asked to escort the shipment to the airport, from where Gonzi would take off back to South America. The shipment was indeed attacked, but the security in the escort barely managed to withstand the assault and see the shipment's delivery through. Cortez's gang versus Diaz's gang. In 1984, Gonzalez of Cortez's gang was sent to Vice City to sell over 200 kilograms of cocaine. Diaz, who controlled most of the drug market in town and who had many men and firepower at his disposal, did not want to accept any competition. Therefore, he found out from Jesus, who squealed on Gonzalez, the whereabouts of the shipment's transport and tried to jump it, ultimately failing. Eventually though, he had the drugs stolen and sold, after which Gonzalez came to him wanting to cut a deal. Diaz used this opportunity to get himself an inside man in Cortez's organization. He agreed to give Gonzalez the guns he had bought for his coke for him to bring back to his boss, in exchange for a promise that from all the drugs his gang would want to ever sell or run through Vice City, they'd have to pay him tax. Additionally, Gonzalez was from now on supposed to inform Diaz about the ongoings in his gang. This brought its benefits 2 years later, when thanks to Gonzalez's info, Diaz was able to stop the Forelli Mafia from creating competition in his market. Diaz provided Gonzalez with an escort to the airport, where from he could take off back to his homeland. Vance Crime Family versus Forelli Mafia. Forelli Mafia was an Italian mafia family operating prominently in Liberty City and led by Sonny Forelli. Giorgio Forelli, however, the Don's cousin and a high-ranking mafia member, conducted a small-time loan shark business in Vice City in 1984. One of his customers became Barry Micklethwaite, the manager of a famous singer, Phil Collins, who was at the time on a concert tour in Vice City. He loaned £2 million British from him and failed to pay him back, which angered Forelli, who in order to motivate Barry to pay up, tried to injure Barry's star, so Phil Collins. Barry, in order to prevent that from happening, hired Victor Vance of the Vance Crime Family to work as security for the singer, which proved essential as Phil's limo was soon attacked on his way to his hotel. The Forellis also tried to mess with Collins' performance by sabotaging the arena where he was set to play at. This is however not 100% certain, as it is not directly stated anywhere that the assassins in that mission were members or were hired by the Forelli Mafia. However, looking at the whole context, it seemed like it most likely was the case. The hitmen planted a bomb inside the stadium and deployed men to guard the entire facility. Victor Vance, yet again asked by Micklethwaite, cleared all danger and disabled the bomb in time. Forellis didn't give up just yet though, because they also attempted to sabotage Phil's concert directly during it. Forelli's goons were cutting the light rig's support cables, planning it to fall down on Collins during his performance. To the rescue came yet again Victor Vance, who stopped Forelli's men and saw the concert through. Vance Crime Family and Diaz's gang alliance. Very crucial alliance for each of the parties. The VCF became, for Diaz, people whom he could use to take care of his wars, while he did not have to waste his resources to do anything apart from gaining information. The Vance brothers very much wanted to be on good terms with Diaz, hoping he could help him with their mutual enemy, the Mendez Cartel, with whom they were conflicted, and whom they couldn't war alone due to the power gap. Diaz first used the brothers to take care of the problem with Cortez's gang, them who attempted to sell some drugs in Vice City without cutting Diaz in. The VCF helped Diaz steal and sell Cortez's drugs and then escort one of their men to the airport after he had agreed to become Diaz's man on the inside. After the brothers done that, their only objective became to get rid of the Mendezes. Diaz found out about Armando Mendez's bearer bonds, which he kept in his mansion at Prawn Island. He also lent the brothers money for which they could buy a hacking device which they could use to take control of Armando's household robot, open the safe in his mansion and burn down the bearer bonds. Sometime later, after Armando had been killed by Victor after he'd kidnapped and killed his girlfriend, Diaz gained another piece of crucial info to utilize by Victor. He found out about Diego Mendez's fortress in the city center, where he was hiding at the moment. Victor first stole a combat helicopter from the military base, after which he launched a full-scale assault on the Mendez fortress, eventually putting him in the ground, thereby paying off the debt they held towards Diaz. Vance Crime Family and Cortez's gang versus Sharks. Sharks were a big power in the East Island of Vice City in 1984. They owned plenty of businesses and were notorious for their extremely strong firepower and combat abilities. Not many messed with them in the story, and they seemed to be mostly minding their own business. They didn't stay in the shadows completely though. During one of the guns transports ran by Cortez's gang and protected by the Vance Crime Family, they launched a full-scale attack on it with the intent to destroy it. After a spectacular shootout filled with explosions and which moved from the city streets to the airport tarmac, they were ultimately just barely held off by the escort security. And overall, they were also in the turf war of the Vance Crime Family throughout a big chunk of the story, which resulted in many shootouts and takeovers. Los Cabrones vs Mendez Cartel. In 1984, the Vance Crime Family was conflicted with the Mendez Cartel following the thievery of their drugs. This resulted in the Mendezes launching a mass attack at all of VCF's business sites. Los Cabrones, the Cuban gang allied with the VCF, took a big part in the defense of the businesses, killing many of Mendez's men in the process. However, no comebacks from the Mendezes were documented in the game. Diaz's gang versus Mendez Cartel. The conflict between two of the biggest powers in Vice City in 1984, which was essentially conducted indirectly via the Vance Crime Family, who at Diaz's orders burned down the cartel's bearer bonds and then went on to raid their main base downtown, ultimately killing the remaining leader of the Mendezes, Diego. However, all the information and the gear was provided by Ricardo Diaz, who obviously wanted to get rid of his main competition, which he finally succeeded in. The Bikers vs Sharks. And the last beef in GTA VCS, there's not much to say about it really, as it has no story representation. It was simply a turf war throughout the entire story, with the Bikers and the Sharks constantly fighting for business sites, especially but not limited to the East Island of Vice. And that is it for today. That's all the beefs and alliances between gangs I was able to find in this game. And from my observations, I feel like gangs collaborate against each other more in this game than in the previous titles, although that might just be an illusion. So let me know in the comments, did you find the video entertaining? Maybe you learned something new? How in your opinion the gang relations in this game compared to the trilogy games? Are they more interesting, less interesting, more complex perhaps, or do they give you a similar vibe? I'm looking forward to reading your comments. Thank you for watching today, take care and respect.